Hello, everybody, and we are back to the next one, which is on Unit 8. We're going to be talking about dissociative disorder, and we're going to jump right in. Remember to pause and jot down all the symptoms and information as you go. All right, so what exactly is dissociative disorders? And dissociative disorders is characterized by it being a defense mechanism which includes a disruption in memory and identity in response to a trauma. Some more common dissociative disorders are dissociative amnesia and dissociative identity disorder, that's what we're going to be talking about today. All right, so they do characterize this, again, like I said, as a defense mechanism. It's a way of coping. Typically, this is somebody that has had a severe trauma, and this is the way for them to deal with this type of trauma. All right, and we're going to start with the first one, which is dissociative amnesia. And this is their inability to remember parts of the past due to a trauma. Okay, now this loss of memory can be triggered by a psychological, and it's a psychological effect, and it's not a physical damage, right? It's not like the hippocampus has been damaged. This is a psychological, like repressing this memory. Now, this is typically associated with a traumatic event, such as a rape or child abuse. And then there's different types of amnesia that you need to write down, okay? So there is what's called localized, and I'll write it here, localized amnesia. And this, for somebody with dissociative amnesia, they can have localized amnesia. And this is basically where it's the inability to remember certain events during a specific stretch of time. Okay, and so for example, it could be maybe like their childhood from 6 years old to like 8 years old. They won't be able to remember what happened in those moments. Okay, this is the more common memory loss for somebody with dissociative amnesia. Then there is what's called selective. Selective amnesia is when there is, and exactly what it means, that there is a loss of a memory of a specific time, okay? And it's usually the time that is like the trauma, okay? So for example, a soldier that went to war, and they were in an event, there was an explosive and a lot of deaths. Like, they will remember what happened like before and after, but they won't be able to remember that moment of the explosion and such, okay? So that's selective. And then there's what's the generalized amnesia. This one's actually really rare when it comes to dissociative. And this is where there's total loss of memory of a person's life. And this could even be like learned skills, knowledge that they have. People that exhibit this, they can actually be found sometimes like kind of wandering, not knowing who they are, their life, their name. So many times, they'll be picked up from a police, or they are sent to a psychiatric hospital to, hopefully that the memory does come back. But this is actually really rare. Now, there's what's called, that behavior is actually called, and I'll write it down, it's dissociative Fuju, I think that's how you pronounce it, Fuju experience, okay? And what that means is basically that there's a complete loss of awareness of a person's own identity. And then sometimes they might even assume or develop like a completely different identity, like a completely different person. This is not the same as dissociative identity disorder. Okay, it's just kind of like, I was once Melissa, now I'm just somebody completely different. Okay, because I don't remember the previous who I was before. Okay, then we're gonna go on to the next one, which is dissociative identity disorder. DID, and this is a very controversial disorder that's on the DSM-5. It used to be called multiple personality disorder. And what this one is that there's a presence of at least two distinct identities, sometimes called an alter, that appear in the host behavior, which the host would be like the main person. Okay. And then that would include an impaired memory beyond just forgetting, right? Like this is the host will not remember anything that happened when that other identity has taken place. Okay. Now, two or more of those identities tend to be completely different. They could be different in age, mannerisms. It could be like even unique brain functioning, okay, which has been interesting. So let's say that maybe, the host can't see, like uses glasses, right? Because they have bad vision. But the other alter, like an alter may not need glasses because they see perfectly well. Okay. Now, there has been actually studies through EEGs, like using EEGs, like measuring the brain waves lengths, and they have found that people that like the alters will have a completely different wavelength and response to like the same stimulus. So they'll watch the same thing and they will have different responses on their brave wavelengths. So it's quite interesting. However, there's a lot of controversy because what they found is that most of the disorder of people with DID is only in Western cultures, okay? As opposed to all of the other disorders, most of them are worldwide. And so this is where a lot of people are like, why is it just on one side and not globally, right? Because so there's 80% of the people that are diagnosed with DID are just in the Western culture. Okay. Another problem with this is that the rates of diagnosis are really inconsistent. So which basically questions the validity of the actual disorder. So usually there's like consistent rates on how, like when people are diagnosed, like either it's increasing or staying the same. And what they found here, it fluctuates all over the place. And so that's one of the controversies. So treatment actually is really, really complex, as well as it's difficult sometimes to diagnose, is what they would say. And it's because during treatment, like it would be in a therapeutic setting, but many times what they would say is that these alters only come out during specific times, right? Or during specific stress or events. So it'll be difficult to kind of even sometimes being aware that this is even happening, okay? And that's basically it for somatic. Now, I'm sorry, not somatic, dissociative. We're going to go on to the somatic disorder. And so this is a new kind of component. And if you want to start on the next page, would be great. So, somatic disorders and what exactly are they? So, somatic is any type of physical disorders caused by a psychological stress. So somatic is like if you're sick or feeling sick, even though it may not be a real illness, okay? Now it presents itself as a psychological problem, but it manifests in the physical, okay? Now, the first somatic disorder you need to know is what's called the somatic symptom disorder, okay? And this is an extreme anxiety about an actual physical symptom that is interpreted as like an illness, sorry. And the key with this one is that there has to be an actual physical symptom, okay? And this is where their thoughts and feelings and behavior, they focus on the symptoms, right, of the pain or fatigue, and that's all they can think about, and it's going to disrupt their daily lives. Now, these are not imagined, again, they're actual real symptoms. So here's an example of what that would look like. So let's say they're having chest pains, right, due to acid reflux, right? Really common symptom of having acid reflux. Now, the person with somatic symptom disorder will basically consume themselves and worry constantly that basically like that pain is going to be a life-threatening condition, and that's all they could think about. They could either think they're having a heart attack or it's cancer, like they go like really extreme, but it's all they're constantly thinking about. Okay, so that's somatic. Illness anxiety disorder is the next one, and this one is a severe obsession with having or getting a serious illness despite no indication of an illness after they followed up with the doctors, right? So they'll go to the doctor and they'll be like, I feel something, I think I'm sick. And then the doctor's like, no, you're good, we did all the work. And yet they will continue to think that they are getting sick or they are sick. Okay, for illness anxiety disorder, they're constantly checking their bodies for any signs. They're constantly doing tests, but there is no physical symptoms, and that's the key word. Okay, now typically under this disorder, you'll see two types of manifesting in like their behavior. And the first one is going to be a care-seeking type. Okay, so care-seeking type are going to be that they're frequently going to the medical doctors and they'll do all these tests. They'll go to all these medical procedures to ensure that they're not sick because they're constantly thinking that they are sick. Okay, and then there's the second one, which is the care avoidant, which is basically that they believe they're sick, but they will not seek any medical care. Okay. Then you have the next one, which is conversion disorder. And conversion disorder is a extreme anxiety into a physical disorder. That basically that physical symptoms are real, but there's no neurological or medical cause for it. Okay. So they will like literally manifest this physical symptom even though it doesn't exist. Okay, now some of those things can be, make sure to write this down, are some motor symptoms in which there can be like weakness or paralysis in their motor functions or abnormal movements. They become limp or they tremor, and then when they test them, like there's nothing wrong, right? And they can't explain it. There could also be sensory symptoms in which it could lead to like reduced or absent sense of touch, vision, or hearing. So this is their senses get affected even though there's no physical, what's this called? There's no physical reason behind, there's no medical reason, okay? Then there's the factitious disorder. And this is basically where the person will falsely report or deliberately create or exaggerate symptoms like physical sick symptoms, like medical problems. They may even induce their own symptoms or injure themselves so that they could get medical attention. Okay? And then there's the factitious disorder imposed on another. This used to be called, and write that down, that Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And this is where you deliberately falsificate like physical or psychological symptoms, or can even induce these symptoms into other people, into someone else, okay, in order to gain emotional attention and sympathy. Okay, so this is just basically you're doing, creating these false medical problems in order to get medical care. Okay, and that's it for this one.